It's Create Day, my friends. Welcome to my channel, where I put my own creative spin on ordinary things, hoping to inspire you to do the same. Let's get started. I have this little wooden tote that is actually from a local gift shop, and that emblem on there is actually wood burned onto the wood on either end. So I am going to have to figure out a way to cover that up. But for starters, we're going to give it a good coat of white chalk paint. I paint the entire tote inside and out. Now to cover up that labeling, I'm going to use DIYS joint compound, and I'm just using a little spatula to rub this on, and I'm going to try and give it somewhat of just a rustic, almost wood grainy look. So I just move the spatula around, making sure that that emblem part is covered, and then I make it semi-smooth with just some lines in it so that it still looks natural. For the wood slats, I'm going to use this HOLTZ collage paper called Entomology. So I'm just laying this over the entire front, and I will do the same on the other side. Just figuring out how much I need. I trim it off, and then I can start to apply this to those slats with my Mod Podge. So I fold back half of the paper and brush the Mod Podge onto the wood slats, and then smooth down the collage paper over the Mod Podge, and then smooth out any wrinkles. And I will be cutting in between the slats to remove the excess. It was just a lot easier to do it in one piece like this, rather than cutting strips and applying them individually to each slat. And here I'm using this little, it's a silicone, almost like a scraper, and it's meant for applying texture paste to a silk screen type stencil. But for me, it works well. It doesn't tear the paper, and it smooths out the wrinkles. But you can use whatever you have on hand that would help you with that. And so now I'm just doing the other half of this piece, applying the Mod Podge, and then smoothing down the paper, and then getting all the wrinkles out too. I do the same process on the other side. Now using my scissors, I will cut in between those slats, and then I can use my sanding block to remove the excess paper. When it came to the tight spots, like in between the slats, I just took the sandpaper off of the block and used it that way to get in between there and remove all the excess paper. I'm using my Mod Podge to check all my corners and glue down anything that wasn't quite secure. And then I will apply a coat over the entire fronts of that decoupage paper on each slat. I'm going to make some molds for the ends of the tote, and I'm using the new spring release from IOD, Dewdrop Pond, and Toadstool. I was so excited to get these. Oh my gosh, so much fun. I'm going to be using air dry clay, and then the cornstarch is for prepping the mold so the clay doesn't stick. And then I like to adhere mine with Gorilla wood glue. It adheres pretty quickly. You don't have a lot of working time with moving your molds around, but to me, the benefit is that you can keep applying your other molds and get to painting them right away instead of waiting for it to set up for hours. So I'm just applying my clay into these molds. And I did have a couple of hiccups with some of these. I think if you're with the ones that have the more fine features to them that are easy to break, if you're going to be putting them on a flat surface, it would probably just be better to use resin. But I was too impatient. My resin takes 2 days to set up, so I went with the clay, and most of them I didn't have any trouble with at all, but there were a few, like this butterfly, or not butterfly, he's a dragonfly. His little tail kind of half broke, and then it completely broke, so I had to glue it on separately. And then on some of the other little critters, the little feet didn't come out in one piece. So, it's just kind of a trial and error. And since I was working on a flat surface, I should have done these in resin. But I was just too impatient for that. And like this little salamander, he was one that his little feet didn't quite make it. So I had to glue them on separately as well. And here's one of our frogs. He turned out pretty good. His hind foot got a little twisted up, but it stayed intact. And then I did a couple of the little ladybugs. And now I'm just going to smooth everything out by dipping my finger in some water and getting rid of all the little rough edges. So I figured out my placement, and now I'm just going to remove each one and put my Gorilla Wood glue on there, just spreading it around with my finger. I waited for these to set up but not completely dry, and then went in with my white chalk paint and gave everything a really good coat of that. I'm making molds for the other side now, so I'm using this smaller frog. And this cute little snail. And then from IOD's Monarch mold, I made a butterfly and then one of the smaller dragonflies. And with the toadstool mold, I'm making this little set of 3 mushrooms. I love it. Once I figured out my placement, it was time to glue everything down with the Gorilla Wood glue. Just like I did on the other side, I'm applying a coat of the white chalk paint. While I was waiting for that to dry, I went ahead and did a second coat to the entire inside of this little wooden tote. So now to add some texture and to help hide any little gaps that occurred while the molds dried, I'm using a 50-50 ratio of the white chalk paint with some baking soda. You can see right there in the frog, there's a little space there. And this mixture just helps fill that in and then adds extra texture to the wood. So now with my clear wax, I am going to go over all of this. I am doing this in preparation for adding black wax. This will help me be able to remove the black wax more easily and have more control over it. And this is my first time using black wax, so I'm really excited to see how this turns out. So I just brush on a coat of the white wax over this entire section, and then using a soft cloth, I wipe back the excess. So here we go with the black wax. I'm applying this with a round brush onto the tops of the molds first and just trying to get it into all those little details. And then I can wipe that back with a soft cloth, and then I actually end up going to a baby wipe. I felt like it was just easier and more effective in removing the excess. And then I can go around the edges of the molds to just make all that detail stand out that much more. It's kind of like a shadowing effect. And throughout this whole process, I do add the black wax onto the wood as well. I want the whole thing to look like it belongs together here. So I just keep adding and wiping away until I get the look that I'm happy with. I don't normally do just like neutral black and white stuff. I like it, but when I'm creating, I tend to really be drawn to colors. I like mixing and blending colors. So this was kind of like a first for me. And I actually really like the way it turned out. And I can see using this black wax a lot more in the future. Now I'm going to use clear wax to coat the inside of this little tote and the decoupage areas as well, because I'm going to be applying the black wax to all of those parts too. And then once I have that all on there, I just wipe it all back with a soft cloth. Now I can start applying the black wax just like I did on the molds. I'm brushing it on and then I will be wiping it back. I'm making sure to get the tops and bottoms of those slats so everything is uniform, and I'm even dragging it around the edges on top of those of the decoupage paper, which, you know, it's been waxed so it doesn't really stick, but it just kind of, I want to make sure it gets in all those little seam areas. I'm using black chalk paint to paint the handle. When the paint dried, I used a baby wipe to go in and do some wet distressing. You really don't have to work very hard at this. It came off really easy. I just wanted to bring back some of that white. Now I'm going to seal it with white wax. You could use clear wax so that it would just maintain its color, but I like the idea of muting down that black with the white wax. I decided to add some of the white wax to the decoupage papers as well. I could have sanded this lightly before I put the final coat of Mod Podge on and kind of gotten the same effect, but I didn't do that. And I realized after the fact that I wanted it more muted and more, you know, weathered looking. So I thought I'd give this a try, and it actually worked really well. I just brushed it on and then gently wiped it off, went back over the areas that weren't quite muted enough, wiped it off again, and it just completely changed that look. Like instead of looking like brand new, it looks weathered and aged. I'm really happy with how that turned out. So here you can see the difference. This is the side with the white wax, and this is the side I haven't done yet. The last thing I want to add to this is a little bow. So I have this ribbon that has the little black stripe down the middle, and I'm cutting it into thirds so that I can make a, I don't know if it's called like a little messy bow, I think. 12-inch long strips that then I cut in half, and then I will do like a crisscross pattern, alternating the different ones. And then you just tie them together in the middle. I used a jute string and tied a knot, and then you just kind of fluff it up and you just have this little cute little raggedy bow. I just tied that onto the handle, made a double knot, and that was it. Now I'm going to make 3 little decorative pillows, and I like the idea of having some white behind the design that I picked for this one. I just cut the drop cloth to size depending on what design I was using, and using the top layer of the drop cloth I applied my white chalk paint, just kind of a messy rectangle to give that transfer a background that it would stand out on. So I'm just checking to see if I have enough of the white paint on there for it, and then I add a little bit more and set it aside to dry. Once it was dry, I just peeled off the backing and went ahead and started applying this transfer with my little transfer stick. This transfer is from IOD's Brocante collection, and when you're applying these to fabric, it just takes a little extra elbow grease. You just have to be patient because the end result is worth it. Look at that. Then I just burnished it with that transfer sheet to make sure it was adhered really well. And now I'm going to use a couple of stamps from IOD's Birds and Bees stamp set. I'll be using StazOn jet black ink. And unfortunately my ink pad was pretty much done. I did get an image, but it just wasn't as dark as I would have liked. So now it was time to go ahead and hot glue all around the edges of this little pillow to be, with the exception of one little opening at the bottom where I could put the stuffing in. You could always glue these together, right sides together, and then turn them out so that you don't have this outward seam. But I like this look, especially for this type of project. So that's why I'm doing it this way. Now I'm just going to stuff it with some recycled stuffing from an old stuffed animal. Once I have it filled, I just go ahead and close up that little opening with some more hot glue. The next two pillows are going to be this square shape. So I'm just taking the top piece of my drop cloth to apply the chalk paint to. It's a little thick, so I watered it down. And I'm just doing this haphazard diagonal type pattern on here. I want it to be messy, not neat. And then I can go ahead, once it's dry, I can apply I have a transfer I'm going to do and a stamp. The stamp I'm using is IOD's Monarch stamp, and I broke out a brand new jet black ink pad for this. I wanted this to work. So I put it on my thin mount and then centered it onto my little piece of fabric and took my time rubbing this on there. I really wanted that ink to soak in and give me a good image. For the next one, I'm using a transfer that's by Redesign called Classic Vintage Labels. And I'm just going to press this on here and start rubbing with the transfer stick until it's completely adhered. So now all that's left is to glue these together, leaving an opening at the bottom, and then I can stuff them, and that will complete these projects. One last thing I want to add is that to stop the fraying of a fabric like this, you can just brush on some Mod Podge around the edges. I want to thank you so much for watching. I hope you find my content useful and would consider subscribing to my channel. But most importantly, I hope I've inspired you to go create something. See you next time.